land that we had here would be great for growing rice, but they didn't really know how to cultivate rice. So in particular, they were looking for people from West Africa who had that expertise to bring here to the Carolinas and Georgia coast, to bring that knowledge of how to build the dikes and the canals, and how to use the sweetgrass baskets to winnow the crop, and all of that wealth of knowledge that they brought with them. Along with the rice that they were growing on the plantations here, they were also growing other cash crops, primarily indigo and cotton here in our region in the Low Country. So you'll also hear the term Geechee a lot when we talk about Gullah or Geechee. Sometimes you will hear a lot more along the Georgia coast, them using the word Geechee a lot more. They're a bit interchangeable, and it kind of depends who you ask, sort of what the definition is of the words. But Gullah is also a language. So it's a language that's a combination of sort of a dialect of the language that the Gullah people were speaking from Africa, combined with the English that they were learning here. And so for years, people thought that it was just like a poor dialect or sort of a slang way that they were speaking, but it really is its own language that's made up of over 4,000 words. So many of the words that you will hear, if you hear someone speaking Gullah, will sound similar to English words, and then some of them will sound a little bit different. So here are some examples of some Gullah words on the left. If you hear people who are Gullah people who have been embedded in their culture for generations, sometimes you'll still hear people speaking with the Gullah dialect and the Gullah language. So there's some words on the left. So I just challenge you to kind of look at the words on the left that are in Gullah, and have a look at the words on the right that are in English, and see if you might be able to match up the words that you're seeing on the left with the right. So for example, on the left, we have baptize. And if you'll look over to the column on the right, you'll see the word baptize. So those words match each other. As you can see, they're similar and sound similar, as a lot of the words do in the Gullah language. So here's the right answers. Hopefully you got a couple of those right. For example, brother would be brother, or friend would be friend, and so forth. There are examples of the language, though, that don't sound anything the same as the English word. For example, a turtle would be a kuda, which sounds nothing like turtle. So it's a combination, if you're hearing the Gullah language, of some words that you're definitely going to recognize, and then some words that you might not recognize. Storytelling is rich in the culture and the history of Gullah. These stories were brought from West Africa, and they're often folk tales that have sort of a moral to the story. And one of the main characteristics of Gullah stories is that they have these animals that are anthropomorphized and given these human characteristics as they go through their roles and the roles that they play in the story. And then at the end, you have learned some sort of a moral. The tortoise and the hare is one of those kinds of examples of the stories that we all learn growing up here in America, where at the end we kind of learn the moral to the story of slow and steady wins the race. So you'll find that a lot of the stories that are passed down through the generations have these kind of animals that are interacting in these ways. Usually that, there's going to be the good guy, and then there's going to be the bad guy, and at the end we're going to learn a moral to the story. And I'll show you later some examples of that. So when you read or hear a Gullah story, it will, if you write it, it's sort of like if you picture it being phonetic. So if you kind of say it out loud, it's a little bit easier to understand the Gullah language. De Fox and De Crow is a popular Gullah tale, and you can see a little bit of the difference here in how it would be written in Gullah, and then how it would be written in English. So then the fox stopped for talk would be then fox started to talk. So again, a lot of similarities in the Gullah language and the English language. And if you kind of sound it out phonetically as you're reading it, then you get a lot more understanding of it, I find, when you're trying to decipher what the story is about. So we have an example of Gullah folk tales that you can kind of listen to. We'll see. There's actually a website called knowitall.org, which is an educational website. And Anita Singleton Prather is a Gullah preservationist and storyteller who helped them create a lot of educational resources. My job is constantly just finding the resources, compiling them to one place at our website so that we can kind of share sort of one-stop shopping with people when they want to learn more about Gullah education. But knowitall.org is a public website that was created for lots of educational purposes. But we'll listen to just for a second of the jealous bragging turtle story. See if we can get that one going so that you can hear the storyteller.
Hey, Alana, did you remember to share sound from your computer? Because we can't hear it.
Mm. Okay, so our sound is not showing on that share screen. So hold on just a sec. Let's see. Let me go back over here. Um,
Oh, Alana. Oh, you're frozen. Oh, boy. You stand by. Good news, you're back. Bad news, I can't hear you. Unmute. Nope. Oh, and she froze. Elena, we can't hear you. You are unmuted in Zoom. Is it your computer that's not unmuting? Lena, can you hear me? I cannot hear you. Elena, why don't you try going out of the meeting real quick and coming right back? I'm so sorry, y'all. Ooh, we'll get this fixed as soon as we possibly can.
Joan, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yay!
Amazing. Okay, awesome. Thank you. No, I don't know. I apologize for that. No, it was not on mute. Random glitch. Thank you all for
It happens.
so patient. Wish I could be there on the stage in person talking with you all. Okay, so I apologize about that. So I'm going to share a couple more things with you about Gullah culture, and then we're going to have we're going to introduce Mr. Smalls and let him tell you all about his sweetgrass baskets that he makes. So, okay, making sure you can see the slideshow.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, friends, for being so patient. Okay, so we're going to put the link to the story so that you can hear that later. I'll put that in the chat in just a bit for you guys so that you can go on. But the Gullah history and culture have really been preserved. A lot of the art forms, like the sweetgrass baskets that we're going to learn about, were really well preserved because of the fact that in the hot summer months, the bugs were really, really bad here in the coastal regions of South Carolina and Georgia. So the plantation owners would oftentimes just leave someone in charge as they would leave to try to escape getting diseases that would be born and spread by the mosquitoes. So these strong influences kind of were able to really be preserved through the fact that the individuals were kind of left in their own secluded community as such on the plantations a lot of times during the year. You'll find, because we do have the coast next to us, a lot of seafood in Gullah cuisine, lots of things brought from Africa, like peanuts and okra and rice, hot peppers, watermelon, things like that, that were seeds that were brought, again, from West Africa. And that is sort of how we got what we think of a lot of those things in our Southern cuisine. If we think about if we were to go to a Southern dining event or create, make Southern food, all of those things that we have that are Southern food were really brought with the West Africans from Africa. So in effect, it's actually African food that we're eating, not Southern food like we think. Indigo dyeing is a really popular art form. Indigo, again, was one of the major cash crops that was grown here in the Low Country region. And this art form of making these wooden stamps that would be dipped in wax. It's a wax resist technique that would be used on textiles to create patterns. Oftentimes in the patterns, you'll see what we call adinkra symbols, which are symbols from Africa that represent different characteristics and traits and character traits and things like that. So you'll see a lot of this still around in the Gullah culture. Sweetgrass baskets, which we're going to learn a lot more about here in a few minutes with Mr. Smalls, are one of the most recognizable Gullah art forms, and we can't wait to hear more from him about that. It's actually a technique. It's a coiled basket technique, not so much like we picture traditional techniques, and Mr. Smalls is going to teach us about that technique here in just a few minutes. The fanner basket, or fanner basket, is one that was used for cultivating rice, and he'll tell us more about that as well. So we talked a little bit about the preservation of culture, and here we actually have one of the things that still kind of around is cast netting. You'll see someone out there throwing a cast net for small fish and for shrimp. That is an art form that has been passed down through the generations of knitting these nets that are used for fishing. So we often want to try to, we want to try to preserve that as well. Some of these different art forms are kind of getting lost with culture and with generations of children coming up with lots of different distractions to keep them from learning some of the traditional art forms. But you will see these Gullah sweetgrass baskets sometimes along the side of the roadways or at different art festivals and places. People still making them and selling them and trying to preserve that tradition. So what I really want to do now is we will have Mr. Smalls join us for some conversation. And then at the end, if you guys have any questions for him, as was mentioned, we'll do a Q&A sort of toward the end of the program. But Mr. Smalls, welcome. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you guys so much for letting me share. And hello to everyone.
Hi. So I want to know, when do you first remember seeing a sweetgrass basket? What's the first time of your recollection you saw one?
I would say about 1, 2 years old, because my family, most of my relatives made the baskets. And after reaching the age of 7, I was taught by my mom and my great grandmother. It was a tradition that was passed down for many generations, and where our goal is to try to preserve and educate on it, that we won't lose it because it's such a vital part of the Gullah culture.
Can you explain to our viewers how the sweetgrass baskets are created in a sort of different manner than the traditional Native American baskets that we think of, a warp and a weft and an over and under? Can you tell us how the sweetgrass baskets are different?
Yes, actually, when you hear of other baskets, it's normally weaving, but the Gullah sweetgrass basket is actually sewn. And what we do, we go from space to space. I've started a basket already, and I'll kind of let you see what I'm trying to explain about sewing the baskets instead of weaving. When you're weaving, you're kind of overlapping, but what we do is we make coils and we sew around the coils until we decide what we want to make and how large we want to make it.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit? We want to see you kind of demonstrate that process in a minute, but tell us about the materials that you're using when you're making these baskets.
Yes, we use 4 different materials. The major material is sweetgrass, which is actually a swamp grass. We find that out in wooded swamp areas. Now, the grass is actually a Spartina grass. It got its name sweetgrass because when they were brought from Africa, they searched the swamps and woods for something that was similar that they use in Africa, and they found the Spartina grass. And but because of the aroma of the grass, they call it sweet grass, but it has a very fresh aroma to it, the grasses. We also use pine needles, and the pine needles are for your coloring and contrast, as well as starting your round baskets. We also use bulrush, which is a saltwater marsh grass, and that's used for coloring and contrast as well. And our last material we use is palmetto fronds. From your palm trees, we'll get the leaves and slice it into strippings, and that particular material bind everything together.
All right, great. And so one question a lot of people oftentimes ask, I know the kids ask it in the school all the time, how long does it take to make a sweetgrass basket?
Ah, well, it all depends on a few things. Of course, the size and the detail that you put into them, and the artisan themselves. Some people are faster than others, so it all depends.
Great. Can you go ahead and show us a little bit, if you've got a basket in the process, before we go on with other questions, can we show, in case some of our viewers have never seen a sweetgrass basket?
Okay, I will show you some of my work, and then I'll show you one that's already started. And okay, here is some of my work. Can you see that?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, and you mentioned earlier about the rice fanner. If you would look, the large round basket that's in the middle, that's the rice fanner that was used on the plantation for cleaning and shafting rice. And so that was the main basket that was made during that era. Okay, now I'll show you one that I've gotten started. If you could tell me you see it or not.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, and that tool you see that's in the basket, hopefully you could recognize what it is, but actually that's the handle of a spoon or a fork, and that's the tool we use to make a space to thread our palmetto through. Now, the Gullah term for that tool is called a nail bone, and how they actually arrived from that term is when they were in Africa, they used bones from animals. Then after they were placed on the plantations, they started using nails because during that era, nails were flat, and anything that was flat and sharp, they were able to use to make the baskets. After being released off of the plantations, they started using the silverware. Of course, if they'd used the silverware on the plantations, they would have gotten in trouble. So what they did is they kept Africa the bone, the plantation the nail, and call it the nail bone. Now that little tool determines the shape and the style of all the baskets you see. It all depends on how you angling it. So when we in the school system, we kind of implement a lot into their studies. Um, the shape and the style would be geometry. The plants or the different materials we use would be science, and of course the history, um, economics. All these things are involved in the teaching of our basketry as we go into the school system.
Great, thank you. Speaking of the school system, while we're on that topic, we do a lot of education and outreach programs here trying to preserve this art form of sweetgrass baskets. Mr. Smalls actually contracts for us here at the Art Center, as he mentioned, to go into schools in our county and in the surrounding counties to work with students. We integrate it with our South Carolina studies in third grade. Typically, when students are studying South Carolina history, we take advantage of this opportunity to bring the artist into the schools. Can you tell us some of the challenges you face with kind of preserving this and the kids these days? Are they receptive? Do they want to learn? Tell us about your experience working with the children.
Okay, my experience in that learning setting, they gravitate to it a little better. But actually, in our communities, they're not going to give up Saturday to make baskets. So, and of course, right now, technology has us a little spoiled. They don't do a lot of things with hands on other than a computer or your cell phone and stuff like that. But when we get the opportunity to go into the schools, they gravitate to it because they're in a learning setting. So that's one of the positive things. But as far as our neighborhoods or our children, our grandchildren, they're not interested too much because they don't want to sit down to take the time to actually make a basket because it does take a lot of patience. An average piece will take you 2 to 3 days, all depends. So we do have that that kind of put a damper on making the basket as well as gathering our materials. The sweetgrass is such a peculiar grass that it doesn't grow everywhere. So we have to kind of search different areas to try to find this grass. So the grass right now is very scarce. A lot of property here in South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, where the grasses actually grow, is being developed. So because of development, we're losing that source of sweetgrass. Of course, pine needles and the bulrush and your palmetto fronds we could pretty much find. But losing our sweetgrass is one of our major materials.
Great. You showed us the fanner basket. Can you show us some of the other baskets and talk about some of the techniques and maybe point out with the colorations and the designs and patterns which material we're seeing in each one of those?
Okay, I sure will. Okay, the basket that I'm showing now is called uh, Crown of Glory. If you see on the top of the crown, that's pine needles for the brown, and then the tannish green color you see is the sweetgrass, and then right above on this row, that's the bulrush for the coloring and contrast, and then you see the strippings. That's your palmetto binding everything together. Now, what
Mr.
we
Small,
usually
hold that
do.
up a little higher. Hold it up
Oh,
just a little higher. There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
okay, sorry about that.
No, you're
But then what we do when we're naming our baskets is usually what it's going to be used for or the way it looks. Now, for that, we call it the Crown of Glory, but that could be used for a fruit basket, or you could use it to hold a casserole dish, all depending on what you want to use it for. Now, we do encourage our clients to use them. They're built, they're built strong enough to last you a lifetime. Now, this particular piece, can you see it?
yes, if you hold it just a little bit higher for us,
Higher? How's that?
the basket higher.
Oh,
There you go. Yep.
okay. Now that particular piece is called an elephant ear. And the reason we named it elephant ears, as you could see around the siding of the basket, it looks like elephant ears that are flapping. And also on this piece, you see the elephant ear design as well. Then you see on this particular piece how we braided the top. Now, a lot of people don't know that braiding of the hair was actually a technique also that was brought from Africa. Okay.
What about the pieces with the lids? Can you tell us what the purpose might be for those? Is it decorative, or would that have been used for something on the plantations?
Well, both decorative and they were used. I'll show you this piece. Is it there? You can see it. That's actually used for storing dry goods. Say you cultivating rice, that would hold your rice or beans or any other dry goods that you might have. The piece here is called a bread basket. So you'll use that typically to serve breads at your dinner or what have you. So every piece is functional. Very seldom we use we make baskets that can't be used. Most times when we make them, we want them to be used.
Great. Mr. Smiles, I know you recently had an opportunity to visit Rwanda and do sort of an exchange with some basketry artists over there. Can you tell us more about that experience?
Yes, it was a beautiful, life-changing experience for us. When we went over, we went to share our knowledge as well of learning their knowledge on making baskets. Now, originally, they didn't start out making baskets, but what happened is after the genocide that happened some years ago, when the families were split because most of the husbands were killed, they to get the women's to bond, they started making baskets that they could provide for their families. The technique is pretty much the same. The materials, they have a sweetgrass, but theirs is not as long as ours. In fact, they took on some of our designs because their baskets were typically, you know, working tools as well. But with our baskets, we went just a step higher and we started making designs and making it very beautiful as well as just a typical basket to for working purposes. So that experience was really, um, really encouraging. That they were also making these baskets, and our the Gullah sweetgrass baskets actually originated from Sierra Leone, West Africa. So that's where our tradition actually was brought from.
Great. Is there anything else that you want to share with us about your baskets? I know I've got some website resources I will want to share with our Zoom community here. Is there anything else that I know people have some specific questions, but anything else that you want to share with us?
Well, yeah, we're really trying very hard to educate and preserve this art form, that we don't lose it. Like I mentioned earlier, it's such a vital part of our heritage and our culture, and we want to try our best to get into different venues that we could teach and educate on the baskets. We're grateful to our ancestors for passing it on to us, and as children, we were taught so we won't lose the technique. Actually, it's pretty much like riding a bicycle. Once you learn, you don't forget. So I just started when I was 7, got away from it, of course, for many years. On my teen, I didn't do it much. But after maybe 15 years ago, I decided that I wanted to educate and preserve. So I stopped my career that I was doing at that time and started making baskets. And then I got into different venues to where I could share the story of the Gullah sweetgrass baskets.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to take just a few minutes to share with you all a few more educational resources. I know we had the glitch trying to go to knowitall.org, so I did put that link for you all over here in the chat, so you can go back later and hear the Gullah tale told in Gullah. And at our website, we have made an effort through some grant funding over the past couple of years to really try to again gather some of these educational resources for teachers and for people in the community who are just kind of interested in learning more about Gullah history.
Alana, we lost you again. No, I think we can hear you now.
Yep. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. All right. I'm going to try one more time to share the website. It seems to be when I share.
Some reason when you share the website, we can't hear you. I am so sorry.
Okay. Can you share the website? Do you have access to that pulled up? Or I'll put it in the chat if not.
Put it in the chat and I can
Yeah.
bring it up. It's going to be the fastest.
So while we're pulling that up, so yeah, so each festival, each February we have a festival, the Gullah Festival, and that will be this Saturday. So I don't know how many of you in the community are near Hilton Head Island, but this Saturday from 12 to 3, Mr. Smalls will be here, along with a lot more of our members of our Gullah community, sharing storytelling and songs and stories and art and food and all of the good things from Gullah culture. It's a free festival that we have each year as part of our outreach program. Yes, there we go. Thank you. So you can learn more about that festival here at our website. But if you will go to the top for me, please, there's a tab that says education. And the second one down is our Gullah virtual library on that drop down menu. And this is a place where you can go and learn a lot more if you're interested in learning a little bit deeper about the things that we learned today. So we put together through grant funding lots of videos. That first one that you're seeing there on the screen now is a Defusky Island virtual tour with Sally Ann Robinson, who is Gullah, and she shows you all around there. We've got an artist. Each one of these is going to have some lesson plans you can download, some videos you can watch. This is a video with the sweetgrass basket here, actually, that we created with Mr. Smalls for schools so that they can hear him telling about the art forum, and you may find that you want to share that with other people. Here is Anita Singleton Prather. She is actually the person who created the material for knowitall.org. That we did put the link for that in the chat. She is a storyteller, and so we also have her go into the schools a lot through our education programs and share that. Coming down, this is Dr. Emery Campbell in the picture here. He and his family actually run the Gullah tour companies here on the island. And this video is pretty interesting because he talks about the tabby ruins. Tabby was a form of architecture that's made with oyster shells that is would have been all of our historic structures here on Hilton Head Island, and the Low Country would be built from that as a form of concrete. So he talks about the tabby ruins that we have been able to preserve now. You know, if they're there, they're not removed. And he talks about how the different plantations would have been set up, how the different structures would have been set up on the plantation. So that's very interesting too. So again, you'll see to the right of all of those videos a lot more information. We can't share it all in 1 hour with you here today, but I hope that if you're interested in learning more, you'll take advantage of all these resources at our Gullah Virtual Library. This is Mrs. Louise Cohen. She's actually preserved one of her, a small home that was, I believe it was her, one of her relatives, and she's turned it into a little Gullah museum with artifacts and things like that. So that's a fun one to watch as well. So I think that we've got some time now for some Q&A. We did see a lot of questions popping up in the chat, so I'm going to turn it back over to our moderator to ask questions that we might be able to help you answer between Mr. Smalls and I.
Jen, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Alana and Mr. Smalls. We have some questions from our viewers. And before we go into those questions, I just want to remind everybody that all the links where you can find out more about the great work that the Art Center is doing is in the chat. Also, very jealous that we won't be able to go and meet with Mr. Smalls at the art festival this weekend. But our first question I want to ask is someone asked, like, how can we order baskets if we are not local from you, Mr. Smalls?
Yes, you can. We do have a website. That website is Gullah Baskets by Michael Smalls. You could go there. We're in the process, though, of recreating that website to give the baskets more of a flair. The person that did it for us before didn't do a real good job, but it does display some of our work as well. So you can go online, and if you want my phone number and my website, my email is tetravelagency@gmail.com. You could go that route as well.
Fantastic. So Dana has dropped Mr. Small's website into the chat. And someone just asked, how do you preserve sweetgrass?
Actually, there's a window period to where we do harvest. So this grass, during the summer months is when we do harvest the grass. During the fall of the year, it starts seeding or flowering, has a beautiful purple or lavender flowering on the top. Then it dies off for the winter, and then it grows back during the spring, and we harvest during the spring. But we're in the process of trying to find organizations that would plant it for us, as well as people who have property that are not being used right now, that we might be able to plant the grass as well. And someone asked earlier, I'm gonna slip this in, did I make my necklace? I did. We do make jewelry as well, not as much as the baskets, but it's a very creative art form. So we do use, jewelry. We do make bracelets, earrings, necklaces, all those types of things as well.
Excellent. Well, it is a wonderful necklace.
Thank
It's
you.
truly a piece of art. Someone just asked, and it kind of ties into what you're talking about. They said that they saw a documentary a while back where developers were trying to come in to take the land. Has that resolved as the land should be protected?
Usually what happens is a lot of the property here in South Carolina basically were Native American, but African American property. It gets tied up in the heirs' property to where if they can't pay the taxes or different things, it's taken away from them. And then your developers come in and they build communities or, different things on it. But we're trying now to block those things from happening. But for the most part, development in these areas are booming. So it's threatening a lot of the properties that the grasses grow.
And another question about, about the baskets. So somebody was wondering, when seeing a basket, say if we saw a Gullah basket or something that was being advertised as a Gullah basket here in Alabama, or even in South Carolina, in a store or elsewhere, is there any kind of indication where you can tell if it's a real or a fake Gullah basket?
I sure can, and that's a very good question. Actually, to see the authenticness of the sweetgrass baskets, if you pick one up, they're very heavy and sturdy. A lot of people pick them up and thinking it was going to be real light, but the way they're built and the grasses is pretty heavy. Most of us, we do sign the bottom of our baskets. We'll put our name and the date. Also, one of the major things that would let you know whether or not it's a sweetgrass basket or not is the pricing. Now, these baskets, they're pretty expensive, but for the most part, They're worth every penny. Of course, they're handmade. The different designs we make. We have our different techniques to where we signature our baskets as well when we make them. But anytime you see the pricing pretty low, you probably won't. There probably won't be a sweetgrass basket. And then you look for the contrast. You always look for the pine needles and the bulrush and the palmetto fronds. Because I've seen baskets that were similar, but you could tell they only use whatever material they're using, so they don't put any contrast in those baskets as well.
I agree. They're worth every penny. And somebody from the viewers wanted to know. They were curious. Are you and your family direct descendants of Congressman Robert Smalls, the former enslaved Civil War hero?
I get asked that question all the time, of course. I do think somewhere down the lineage we're related. My great grandmother, who carried the Smalls name, she was also married to a Small, so there's double jeopardy there to where we think that he is a relative. And I read one of his books, and of course, I ran up on a picture of him when he was like in maybe his 20s, and it's the exact look alike for my cousin, my uncle's son, splitting image. So there is a low tie in that as well.
That's awesome. We have another question about the environment and the community. How is the Gullah Geechee community being affected by coastal erosion, and what is being done to address it? And I guess this can go to both or either of you.
Alana, you wanted to answer that?
Yeah. What is being done about it? Is a tricky question, and I am not a conservationist, and so I wouldn't be able to give you an accurate scientific answer to that. But I can give you just sort of an anecdotal answer just from the fact that I live in the community. There are definitely laws and things that are put into place to try to keep certain spaces green spaces and to keep certain parts of our ecosystem and our environment intact. But we know coastal erosion is something that we can't stop. Hurricane Matthew came through a few years ago and really we got the eye of the hurricane here on Hilton Head Island, and it really destroyed a lot of our habitat. And just north of Hilton Head Island, we have a beach that's a park, actually a state park called Hunting Island. And that, because it is a preserved park space along the beach line, it was a real eye opener to see how much of the beach was eroded just from that one hurricane, how many of the trees were taken down from that hurricane and won't come back for maybe never. That whole island used to be much, much larger. And if you go camping there, you hear the stories of, well, I was a kid and came camping here. It went way out there. So it's a real thing, the erosion, especially with all of the hurricanes and natural disasters and things. We've had a lot of tropical storms and hurricanes, more so than ever, like in the most recent years. So, I know that development definitely causes that. It's got the side effects of the, not only they taken away the habitat, but then the runoff from the development and that sort of thing. But definitely just nature is taking its course too on our coastal region and just causing erosion. The coastline's just getting smaller and smaller.
So we have a few more questions, and I promise everybody who's watching that we'll get to all of them. Kind of going back to Mr. Smalls, and I'll come back to you, Alana, in a moment. So a viewer wanted to know, will the baskets uphold their integrity if they get wet?
Yes, they do. Of course, all your materials are natural materials. Usually, if they get wet, you just kind of let them air dry. And then asking that question as well, if you purchase one and it gets spoiled, say you spill something on it, you could wash it. Just a mild soapy water clean it up, rinse it in cold water, and just let it air dry.
Okay, and for Elena, someone wants to know what age or grades have Gullah culture incorporated in their school curriculum, I believe at the Art Center.
Yeah, so here in South Carolina, we go by our state standards for social studies, and so it's third grade, and then again in eighth grade. That state history and the curriculum obviously would vary from different states, but that's how they align it here in South Carolina. So that's kind of when we started the tradition of having the third graders learn about it, because one, they're open-minded enough still at that age to be introduced to something new, and eager to learn, about new things, and two, because it ties in directly with their social studies curriculum. And unfortunately, we do find that if you go look at the state standards, because our state's, large, and we don't have, Native Islanders or Gullah community as much throughout the state as we do here in the Low Country region, there's not really a lot about it in the text and in the actual standards. It kind of breezes past, okay, Civil War's over, just everything goes so fast. So we just try to make sure that our kids, a lot of the kids that go to our schools here in Beaufort County, their ancestors are Gullah and they're part Gullah, and they might have, just thought that their grandmother talked a little funny or something, and it's not been as well. They've been so mainstreamed and integrated with the rest of the children that we find sometimes even going into the schools and they're like, oh, maybe I'm Gullah, and didn't even realize it. So especially here in the Low Country region, we like to make sure that the kids know about it and know the importance and the significance of it, and know how those customs and culture that were brought from West Africa still play a part and a role in the things, again, in the foods and the stories that we tell, like the folk tales and things. It's important for them to learn where it all comes from. But primarily third and eighth grade, for your short answer, for us in South Carolina.
That's excellent. And I love that, in learning the curriculum, that they're, some of the students, a lot of the students in your area are learning about themselves, in a history that maybe that they weren't aware of. I think that's really beautiful. Someone asked, what is the Gullah community faith religion? Is there any specific denomination or faith preference?
Not really. Within that community, African American Episcopal is one of the major religions, as well as Christianity, Pentecostal, Holiness. You do have a few other religions that most of the Gullah people attend.
There's also a real significance to the Praise House, and you can learn more about that too from knowitall.org. But the songs and the spirituals that were, they were able to really kind of keep singing was one thing that was allowed on the plantations for a while. Drums were not. Drums were a big form of communication, and something they would have done in Africa, but on the plantations they weren't allowed. And so the Gullah people were able to use clapping and stomping and ring shouts and things like that, or even using walking sticks, tapping on the floor to create rhythm of the song in the praise house onto the wooden floor. And so some of this became a form of communication, as you might know from studying American history, with slaves, a way to communicate things with one another through their songs and through their spirituals. So a lot of that has been preserved. Some of the praise houses have also been preserved through this trying to hold on to every little bit we have before it gets destroyed, of our Gullah culture.
We have two more questions before we close out. So one, the basket weaving is just so fascinating. That somebody asked a really great question. Does anybody make hats out of the sweetgrass, or is it just primarily baskets?
Well, we actually do have. We can make hats. We do make hats. It's just a little more tedious work to make the hats, because because of the weight or the heaviness of the grass, we have to make it very thin that it, you know, it would won't be so heavy on the head. But we do make hats as well. There's so many different facets of what we make with the baskets. I've seen lampshades, I've seen lamps, I've seen mirrors. So there's a whole lot of different things that we do make with the baskets or the style of the basket.
Well, I personally am really excited to check out your website and to keep up with all of the great projects that you take on and have taken on. We have one more question. Someone said that they noticed that there was a Gullah community that still exists near they corrected themselves. It wasn't Hunter Island. It was near Hunter Beach, South Carolina. Are there still communities that still exist that are considered a Gullah community or Gullah towns?
There is. Most of your rural areas here in South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, you could find the Gullah people or Gullah traditions. I grew up in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, which is north of Charleston. And if I go back to that area, I'll still hear the language because, you know, relatives and cousins and family members, but there are still different areas that you could find the culture. So along the Atlantic coast, most of those barrier islands, you would find the Gullah culture.
Well, thank you so much for this really special program. And I know that this sentiment is not just felt by me, but by everybody who viewed and looking at the chat right now. Again, for anybody who's watching, you can find out more about the Art Center of Coastal Carolinas. View their website and their virtual library. The links are in the chat, as well as Mr. Small's website. And you are always welcome to contact me if you have any further questions. And thank you again, Mr. Smalls and Alana, for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Y'all have a great day.